Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. For over 4,500 years, a single structure has stood as the ultimate testament to human ambition, a colossal enigma of stone and sand that has defied time, nature, and our own understanding. It is the last surviving wonder of the ancient world, a mountain built by human hands on the arid plains of Egypt. How did a civilization without modern technology erect a monument so massive, so precise, that it continues to baffle engineers and archaeologists to this day? What secrets are still sealed within its hidden chambers and labyrinthine passages? Join us as we journey back to the age of the pharaohs to uncover the extraordinary story of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The story of the Great Pyramid begins not with a single king, but with an entire epoch, an age of audacious ambition and unparalleled power, known as the Old Kingdom. Spanning from approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, this was the era that defined ancient Egypt, forging its identity in stone and faith. It was a time of profound stability, secured by the lifeblood of the Nile River, whose predictable floods nourished the land and its people. This agricultural abundance, managed by a highly centralized and bureaucratic state, created a surplus of wealth and labor that was unprecedented in human history. At the apex of this rigid societal pyramid stood the pharaoh, no mere mortal ruler, but a living god, the earthly incarnation of the falcon god Horus. He was the sole intermediary between the divine and the human realms, the guarantor of Ma'at, the cosmic principle of order, truth, and justice. The entire existence of the kingdom revolved around maintaining this delicate balance, and the pharaoh's well-being, both in this life and the next, was paramount to the survival of the cosmos. This foundational belief system was the engine that drove the Egyptians to achieve the impossible. The architectural journey began before the Fourth Dynasty, with the revolutionary step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. Designed by the legendary vizier and architect Imhotep, it was the world's first colossal stone building, a declaration that Egypt's rulers were destined for an eternity far grander than their predecessors. This monument was a proof of concept, demonstrating that the Egyptian state could organize and command the logistics, resources, and manpower required for projects of a divine scale. The Old Kingdom was, therefore, not just an age of kings, but an age of giants, where belief, resources, and absolute authority converged to create a civilization capable of building for eternity. Into this world of established power and architectural momentum stepped a man whose name would become synonymous with the single greatest monument ever constructed, Khufu. Ascending to the throne around 2589 BCE, he was the second pharaoh of the illustrious Fourth Dynasty, inheriting a kingdom at the zenith of its power from his father, Sneferu. He was not, however, starting from scratch. Sneferu himself was a prolific builder, a pharaoh who had experimented with pyramid design on a massive scale. His projects at Medum and Dashur, including the enigmatic Bent Pyramid and the majestic Red Pyramid, served as the crucibles where Egyptian engineering was tested, refined, and perfected. These earlier structures were the training grounds that solved crucial architectural problems and developed the techniques necessary for the quantum leap in scale and precision that Khufu envisioned. When Khufu took the throne, he commanded a state that was a well-oiled machine for monumental construction. He inherited a generation of skilled architects, quarrymen, and laborers who understood the art of moving mountains. More importantly, he embodied the absolute peak of divine kingship. To his people, Khufu was not a man. He was a god on earth. His word was law, his will was cosmic decree. The state's entire economy, its vast agricultural output, and its population were his to command for the ultimate purpose, ensuring his successful journey into the afterlife, and by extension, preserving the divine order of the universe. This concentration of spiritual and temporal authority was absolute. Unlike rulers who govern by consent or coalition, the pharaoh's authority was divinely ordained and unquestionable. It was this unique position, a fusion of god and king, that empowered Khufu to dream on a scale no human had ever dared before, and to mobilize an entire nation to realize that dream. The Great Pyramid of Giza was born not merely of stone, but of a profound theological vision. It was conceived as far more than a tomb. It was a resurrection machine, a meticulously engineered vehicle designed to transport the soul of the divine king into the eternal embrace of the gods. Upon his ascension, Khufu, guided by his vizier and nephew Hemiunu, the probable architect of this grand project, set in motion a plan of breathtaking audacity. The vision was to create a perfect primeval mound, the Benben, from which the world was created, a physical manifestation of the sun's rays that would serve as a stairway to heaven for the departed pharaoh. This wasn't just about building bigger, it was about building perfectly. The design represented a culmination of a century of architectural evolution, yet it surpassed everything that came before it, with an almost unfathomable leap in precision and scale. The planning phase alone was a monumental undertaking. Egyptian astronomers and priests would have meticulously calculated the pyramid's alignment to the cardinal points with astonishing accuracy, orienting it to the celestial bodies that were central to their theology of rebirth, particularly the circumpolar stars, which they considered immortal. The mathematical genius required was staggering. The architects employed principles that we are still working to fully understand, encoding ratios like pi and the golden ratio into the structure's dimensions, whether by design or by an intuitive mastery of form. The logistical challenge was equally immense. The project would require quarrying, transporting, and lifting over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing upwards of 80 tons, with a precision that modern builders would find difficult to replicate. This was the ultimate state project, a national effort focused on a single, sacred goal: to defeat mortality and ensure the eternal reign of their God-King, thereby securing the stability of the cosmos itself. The location for such a divine undertaking could not be left to chance. The selection of the Giza Plateau was a deliberate and brilliant choice, guided by a confluence of practical geology and profound religious symbolism. Geologically, the plateau offered a foundation worthy of a god. It was a solid, elevated shelf of limestone bedrock, strong and stable enough to support the colossal weight of the pyramid, which would eventually exceed 6 million tons. A weak or unstable foundation would have doomed the project from the start. Furthermore, the plateau itself contained vast quarries of high-quality limestone, the very material needed for the pyramid's core blocks. This proximity was a logistical masterstroke, dramatically reducing the time and labor required to transport the bulk of the building materials to the construction site. But Giza's significance ran deeper than its bedrock. It was located on the west bank of the Nile, which the ancient Egyptians universally regarded as the land of the dead. This was the direction of the setting sun, where the sun god Ra was believed to begin his perilous nightly journey through the underworld, before being reborn at dawn. To build an eternal monument here was to place it directly on the path of resurrection, integrating the pharaoh's afterlife journey with the daily cosmic cycle of death and rebirth. The site also offered a commanding view, visible for miles, a constant and powerful symbol of the king's divine authority, looming over the nearby capital city of Memphis. Before a single block was laid, the sacred ground was prepared with incredible care. A massive area of the bedrock was leveled with a precision that is almost unbelievable. Engineers achieved a base that was flat to within a mere 2 centimeters. This sacred stage, perfectly leveled and cardinally aligned, was now ready for the performance of a lifetime: the construction of Khufu's eternal horizon. With Radama's body barely cold, the royal court of Antananarivo became a nest of vipers, a place of whispered plots and deadly ambition. In this cauldron of uncertainty, Ranavalona, once a lesser wife, moved with chilling precision. She was not the designated heir. That title belonged to the young Prince Rakotobe, Radama's nephew. But Ranavalona, backed by a powerful conservative faction of military officers and traditionalist nobles, saw her opportunity. They yearned for a return to the old ways, a rejection of the European treaties and Christian missionaries that Radama had welcomed. Ranavalona became the vessel for this reactionary wave. Her first act was a masterstroke of political theater and raw power. She secured the loyalty of the army and the guardians of the royal talismans, the Sampi, which were the sacred heart of the kingdom's spiritual life. With these pillars of power behind her, she declared herself queen. The purges that followed were swift and merciless. Prince Rakotobe, the rightful heir, was her first target. He and his mother were cornered and executed by spearmen, their blood spilled to sanctify her ascent. Other potential claimants and their families met similar fates. The message was unequivocal. There was only one power in Madagascar, and it was absolute. Standing before her people, Ranavalona delivered a speech that would define the next 3 decades. She tore up the treaties with Britain, declaring that the ancestors, not foreign kings, were the true sovereigns of the land. She vowed to rule not by the new laws of Europeans, but by the sacred traditions of her forefathers. This was not merely a change in leadership. It was a violent tearing away from the path of modernization. Ranavalona was not just seizing a throne. She was meticulously designing a new foundation for the kingdom, one built on fear, reverence for the past, and her own unquestionable, divinely ordained authority. Every rival eliminated was a stone laid in this new fortress of absolute rule. As Ranavalona cemented her power, her gaze turned toward what she perceived as the most insidious threat to her kingdom's soul: Christianity. To the queen and her traditionalist court, the foreign faith was more than a religion. It was a cultural Trojan horse, a vanguard for European colonialism that threatened to erode the very foundations of Malagasy society. The Christian God sought to supplant the authority of the ancestors, and its teachings of universal brotherhood undermined the rigid social hierarchies upon which her power rested. For a decade, a tense standoff persisted, but by 1835 the Queen's patience had vanished. On February 26th, she issued a kabari, a royal edict, that would unleash a wave of terror. Before a vast assembly, she declared the practice of Christianity illegal for her Malagasy subjects. Baptism, worship, and even the possession of a Bible were now capital offenses. The London Missionary Society was effectively expelled, their schools shuttered, and their printing presses silenced. A period of brutal persecution, known as the Tani Maizena, or the time when the land was dark, had begun. The first Malagasy martyr, Ranavalona, was executed in August 1837. Accused of witchcraft for her unwavering faith, she was speared to death, her body left for wild dogs to devour as a warning to others. This was only the beginning. Believers were subjected to unimaginable cruelty. They were sold into slavery, forced to endure the tangina poison ordeal, or executed in theatrically barbaric ways. A favorite method was to hurl Christians from the cliffs of Ampamarinana, the place of leaping, their final prayers swallowed by the wind as they plunged to their deaths. For Ranavalona, this was not simply religious persecution. It was a necessary and righteous war to purify her nation and defend its sacred identity from foreign contamination. To enforce her will and purge Malagasy society of all dissent, Queen Ranavalona wielded a terrifying and ancient weapon of justice, the tangina ordeal. This ritual was far more than a simple trial. It was a sacred judgment, a direct communion with the ancestors to determine guilt or innocence. The instrument of this divine verdict was the poisonous nut of the tangina shrub. When a person was accused of a crime, be it theft, treason, or the forbidden practice of Christianity, they were subjected to this harrowing test of fate. The ritual was precise and steeped in tradition. The accused was forced to swallow the ground tangina poison, mixed with water. Following the poison, they would be made to ingest 3 small pieces of chicken skin. The entire community would watch as the poison took its course. The outcome rested on a simple, brutal binary. If the accused's body convulsed and they vomited up all 3 pieces of skin, the ancestors had declared them innocent. They were miraculously saved, their name cleared. But if they failed to vomit the skins, or if the poison overwhelmed them and they died, their guilt was proven beyond all doubt. There was no appeal from the judgment of the ancestors. Under Ranavalona, the use of the tangina ordeal escalated to an unprecedented scale, becoming a primary tool of state-sponsored terror. It was not reserved for major crimes. It was used to settle village disputes, root out political enemies, and, most devastatingly, to identify and eliminate Christians. It is estimated that during her 33-year reign, the ordeal claimed the lives of as many as 100,000 people, representing a staggering 20 to 50% of the population in some parts of her kingdom. The tangina was the ultimate expression of her rule, an archaic, brutal tradition transformed into an efficient instrument of social control, instilling absolute fear and obedience. Having severed ties with Europe and purged foreign influence from her shores, Queen Ranavalona faced a monumental challenge: how to defend her island fortress against the encroaching colonial powers. Her solution was a paradoxical blend of fierce isolationism and pragmatic technological appropriation. She understood that to remain independent, Madagascar needed the very weapons of the Europeans she so despised. This led to one of the most remarkable chapters of her reign: a forced, state-driven industrial revolution. At the heart of this endeavor was a shipwrecked Frenchman named Jean Laborde. A brilliant and resourceful craftsman, Laborde was forbidden from leaving the island and instead put to work for the Queen. Under her command, he established a massive industrial complex just outside the capital. It was a city of fire and iron, a place where Malagasy workers, under Laborde's tutelage, learned to manufacture everything the kingdom needed. They forged cannons, built muskets, milled gunpowder, and even produced soap, cement, and porcelain. This industrial leap was powered by a brutal system of forced labor, known as Fanampuana. Tens of thousands of Malagasy subjects were conscripted from their villages and forced to toil on the Queen's projects, whether in Laborde's factories, in the mines, or constructing palaces and fortifications. Conditions were horrific, and mortality rates were appallingly high. Many considered a Fanampuana assignment a death sentence. While her people suffered, the Queen's military grew formidable. Her army, equipped with locally made artillery and firearms, became one of the most powerful in pre-colonial Africa. It was this strength that allowed her to repeatedly repel European incursions, most notably defeating a joint Anglo-French attack at Tamatave in 1845. Ranavalona had successfully turned her kingdom inward, creating a self-sufficient, militarized state built on the sweat and blood of her people. A fortress capable of defying the world. The image of the pyramids rising from the desert is often accompanied by a dark narrative, one painted by the Greek historian Herodotus and later dramatized by Hollywood. The crack of a whip, the groan of enslaved masses toiling under a merciless sun. For centuries, the world believed these magnificent structures were built on the backs of slaves, a testament to the tyranny of the pharaohs. However, decades of meticulous archaeological work have systematically dismantled this myth, revealing a far more complex and compelling truth. The real story is not one of slavery, but of a nation mobilized in a monumental act of faith, engineering, and communal effort. The key to unlocking this truth was found not in the pyramids themselves, but in the sand nearby. In the late 1980s, archaeologists unearthed the lost city of the pyramid builders, a sprawling settlement known as Hayt el Ghurab. This was no mere slave camp. It was a highly organized, state-sponsored city, complete with long galleries that served as barracks for workers, bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily, and breweries to supply the workforce. The evidence pointed to a well-fed, well-cared-for population. Forensic analysis of animal bones excavated from the site revealed that the workers were consuming prime cuts of beef, mutton, and goat, a diet far richer than that of the average Egyptian farmer. They were not disposable labor. They were skilled, valued assets in a national project of unprecedented scale. Further evidence came from the discovery of the workers' own cemeteries, located on a hillside overlooking the grand necropolis they were building. Here, men and women were buried with honor, their graves stocked with bread and beer for the afterlife. Many skeletons showed signs of healed fractures and amputations, clear indications that they received sophisticated medical care. A slave economy would have simply discarded an injured worker. This society, however, invested in healing them. The workforce was likely comprised of a core of permanent, skilled artisans and stonemasons, supplemented by a rotating levy of peasants. These were not slaves, but citizens performing a form of national service or corvée labor, likely during the annual Nile inundation when their fields were flooded and agricultural work was impossible. Building the pyramid was their duty to their god-king, a way to ensure cosmic order, or Ma'at, and a source of profound national pride. Before a single block could be laid, before any ramp could be constructed, the architects of the Great Pyramid faced a challenge of staggering proportions, creating a perfectly level and precisely oriented foundation upon which eternity could be built. Any mistake here, even by a fraction of an inch, would be magnified disastrously as the structure soared towards the heavens. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. The base of the Great Pyramid covers more than 13 acres, an area that could comfortably house 10 football fields. Across this vast expanse, the ancient engineers achieved a level of precision that remains astonishing. The entire foundation is level to within just 2.1 centimeters, less than an inch. How was this possible without lasers or modern surveying equipment? The most widely accepted theory points to a simple yet ingenious use of water. The builders likely cut a grid of intersecting trenches into the limestone bedrock across the entire site. They then flooded these trenches with water. As water always finds its own level, its surface would have created a perfect reference plane across the entire 13-acre footprint. Workers could then measure down from the water's surface to a consistent depth, chipping away the surrounding rock until a massive, almost perfectly flat platform was established. But leveling was only half the battle. The pyramid also had to be aligned with the cosmos. Its four sides are oriented to the four cardinal directions with an accuracy that is breathtaking. The deviation from true north is less than 3/60ths of a degree, a feat of alignment more precise than that of the Meridian Building at the Greenwich Observatory in London. This celestial precision was likely achieved through meticulous astronomical observation. One method, known as the solar gnomon technique, involves tracking the shadow of a vertical pole, or gnomon, throughout a day. By marking the arc of the shadow's tip, one can find the midpoint to establish a perfect east-west line from which a true north-south line can be derived. Another theory suggests they used the simultaneous transit of two stars, such as Mizar and Kochab, around the celestial pole to find true north. Whatever the exact method, the result was a foundation not just physically stable, but cosmically aligned. A perfect, square base on which to build a stairway to the stars. The foundation was perfect. The workforce was organized. But the greatest logistical puzzle remained. How did the ancient Egyptians lift millions of stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each, to a height of nearly 500 feet? This question has captivated engineers and historians for centuries, giving rise to countless theories, from the fantastical to the forensic. While the exact method is still debated, the consensus among Egyptologists is that the answer lies not in lost technology or extraterrestrial aid, but in the masterful application of simple machines, primarily the inclined plane, or ramp. The most obvious solution, a single, long external ramp extending straight from the pyramid's base, presents significant problems. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp would need to become incredibly long and steep, eventually containing more material and requiring more labor than the pyramid itself. This makes the straight ramp theory impractical for the pyramid's full height. Consequently, scholars have proposed several more efficient alternatives. One popular idea is a zigzag or switchback ramp built upon one of the pyramid's faces, allowing for a more gradual incline. However, maneuvering massive, multi-ton blocks around tight corners would have presented its own formidable engineering challenges. Another compelling theory, proposed by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, suggests the use of an internal ramp, In this model, a straight external ramp was used to build the lower third of the pyramid. From there, blocks were hauled up through an internal corkscrewing tunnel that ascended just inside the pyramid's outer casing. This would explain the lack of archaeological evidence for a massive external ramp and is supported by microgravimetry scans that have detected a low-density spiral anomaly within the structure. It is most likely that the Egyptians employed a combination of these techniques: a broad, straight ramp for the lower courses, where the heaviest granite blocks were used, transitioning to a more nimble spiral or switchback system for the lighter, higher levels. The blocks themselves were likely transported on wooden sledges, their paths lubricated with water to reduce friction, and pulled by teams of men using strong papyrus ropes. The construction of the Great Pyramid was a triumph of project management, a symphony of coordinated effort where thousands of people and simple, effective tools were organized to raise a mountain of stone to the heavens. Deep beneath the colossal mass of the Great Pyramid, carved directly from the living rock of the Giza Plateau, lies a chamber that speaks to a grand, abandoned vision. This is the subterranean chamber, a raw, unfinished void that represents the pyramid's first and deepest secret. Located approximately 100 feet below ground level, it was almost certainly intended to be the original burial chamber for Pharaoh Khufu. The plan, it seems, was to follow the tradition of earlier pyramids by placing the tomb beneath the structure. However, for reasons we can only speculate upon, this plan was scrapped. The architects made the audacious decision to move the burial chamber upwards, into the very heart of the pyramid's superstructure, first planning what we now call the Queen's Chamber, and finally settling on the magnificent King's Chamber. The subterranean chamber was left incomplete, a fossil of a discarded architectural idea. Its creation was a monumental task in itself. This space was not built, it was excavated. Using nothing more than copper chisels, which would have blunted quickly against the limestone, and hard dolerite pounders, teams of workers painstakingly chipped away at the solid bedrock. They carved a long, descending passage over 300 feet into the earth before hollowing out the chamber itself. The room is a stark contrast to the polished perfection of the King's Chamber far above. Its walls are rough-hewn, the floor is uneven, and the ceiling is jagged. It feels primal and ancient, a raw wound in the earth. This unfinished state provides archaeologists with invaluable clues about the quarrying and construction techniques of the time. Within this rough space are enduring mysteries. A narrow, dead-end corridor extends southward from the chamber for about 50 feet, before abruptly stopping. Its purpose is unknown. Even more enigmatic is a deep, square pit that dominates the chamber's floor. Was it the beginning of an even deeper chamber? A symbolic passage to the underworld, the Duat? Or simply a test pit to assess the quality of the bedrock? We may never know for certain. The subterranean chamber is a powerful testament to the ambition and adaptability of the pyramid's builders. To expend such immense effort carving a tomb from solid rock, only to abandon it for an even more daring and complex plan, reveals a relentless drive to innovate and achieve the impossible for their divine king. Within the kingdom of Queen Ranavalona I, justice was not a matter of evidence or testimony, but a terrifying passage through a divine ordeal. The primary instrument of this system was the tangina poison, extracted from the nut of the Cerbera odolam tree. For the accused, this was the ultimate arbiter, a physical journey through corridors of life and death. The trial by ordeal was a public spectacle, a brutal piece of theater designed to reinforce the Queen's absolute power and the infallibility of the traditional gods. The accused, whether suspected of treason, witchcraft, or Christianity, was forced to swallow the poison along with 3 pieces of chicken skin. Their fate and their guilt or innocence hinged entirely on a violent physiological reaction. If the individual managed to vomit all 3 pieces of skin, they were declared innocent. This was the ascending corridor, a miraculous return to the world of the living, their name cleared and their loyalty proven in the most harrowing way imaginable. They had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and emerged, sanctified by the gods, and by extension, the Queen herself. But for the vast majority, the path led downwards. The descending corridor was a swift and agonizing journey to the grave. If they failed to vomit the skins, or if the potent neurotoxin simply overwhelmed their system and killed them outright, their guilt was sealed for eternity. Their families were disgraced, their property confiscated by the crown, and their memory erased. This system was not merely a judicial process. It was a powerful tool of social and political control. It eliminated rivals, purged dissenters, and instilled a deep, abiding fear in the populace. The Tangina ordeal created a society where accusation was tantamount to a death sentence, where the corridors of power were lined with the ghosts of those who had failed the ultimate test. It is estimated that this practice was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands, perhaps even over 100,000 people during her reign, making it one of the deadliest instruments of state-sanctioned terror in the 19th century. Queen Ranavalona's reign was not only defined by what she destroyed, but also by what she built. Yet, her architectural ambitions were not marvels of shared prosperity, but monuments built upon a foundation of human suffering. The Grand Gallery of her kingdom was a vast, ongoing project of national construction, from military fortifications and roads to immense public works, all accomplished through the Fanampuana, a system of unpaid, forced labor. This was her corbelled arch, an immense structure where each citizen was a stone, pressed into service to support the weight of the state's ambitions. The pressure was immense and unrelenting. When the Queen decided to build a new road, fortify a city, or transport a colossal stone column for her palace, entire villages were conscripted. Men, women, and children were forced to leave their homes and fields for months, sometimes years, at a time. They labored under brutal conditions, with little food and no pay, overseen by the Queen's soldiers. The mortality rate on these projects was staggering. A particularly infamous example was the transportation of a massive wooden beam for the Rova Palace. Thousands of laborers were tasked with dragging the immense timber over miles of difficult terrain. The human cost was horrific. It is said that for every yard the beam moved forward, a life was lost, their bodies simply left by the wayside. This system was the engine of her isolationist policy. By using forced labor, Ranavalona could undertake massive projects without relying on foreign trade or investment, thus maintaining her kingdom's self-sufficiency. However, this architectural marvel crippled the Malagasy economy from within. With so many people diverted from agriculture, famine became a constant threat. The Fanampuana system was a testament to her absolute power, a visible demonstration that every resource in the kingdom, including the very lives of her subjects, belonged to her. The roads, the palaces, the fortifications, they were all part of the grand, imposing structure of her rule, each one cemented with the blood and sweat of a captive population. At the geographic and political center of Madagascar, perched atop the highest hill of Antananarivo, stood the Rova, the royal palace complex. This was Queen Ranavalona's sanctuary and her prison, the heart of her kingdom, as sealed and remote as a pharaoh's burial chamber. Within these walls, shielded from the outside world and the populace she ruled with such terror, the queen's paranoia and absolute power converged. The Rova was not a single building, but a fortified compound, a city within a city. Its most prominent structure was the Manjakamyadana, a towering wooden palace that served as her primary residence. It was here, in these opulent but isolated chambers, that all major decisions were made. Decrees that would lead to the deaths of thousands, policies that would sever ties with the world, and commands for ruthless military campaigns, all emanated from this sealed heart. Life inside the Rova was a complex web of ritual, tradition, and suspicion. Ranavalona was surrounded by a court of nobles and servants, but trust was a non-existent currency. She relied heavily on traditional diviners and astrologers, the Impisikidi, to guide her decisions and identify threats, both real and imagined. Every action was steeped in superstition, every visitor scrutinized, every word weighed. This chamber was the source of her xenophobia. It was here that she met with the few foreign diplomats she would tolerate, often treating them with disdain and suspicion, reinforcing her belief that outsiders sought only to corrupt her people and steal her land. The Rova was a microcosm of her rule, traditional, insular, and fiercely guarded. It was a symbol of Malagasy strength and sovereignty, but also of the profound isolation that characterized her reign. From this elevated fortress, she could look out over her capital city, yet she remained utterly disconnected from the suffering and fear her policies engendered below. It was the nerve center of a state built on fear, the silent, imposing heart from which all power flowed and where no dissent could ever penetrate. Every great monument requires a finishing touch, a polished outer layer that presents a vision of perfection to the world. For Queen Ranavalona, this final polish was her aggressive policy of cultural purification and absolute isolationism. She sought to encase Madagascar in a protective shell, pristine and unblemished by foreign influence, much like the gleaming white limestone that once covered the Great Pyramids. This casing was meticulously applied. First, Christianity, which she viewed as a spiritual disease and a tool of European encroachment, was brutally eradicated. Missionaries were expelled, and Malagasy converts were hunted down, subjected to the Tangina ordeal, or executed in horrific public displays, such as being thrown from the cliffs of Antananarivo. Next, she severed nearly all political and economic ties with Europe. Treaties were abrogated, trade dwindled to a trickle, and foreigners were largely banished from the island. Her goal was complete self-sufficiency, a nation that looked inward, relying only on its own resources, traditions, and industries. She fostered local manufacturing, encouraging the production of soap, cloth, and most importantly, modern weaponry, with the help of a few stranded Europeans, like Jean Laborde, whom she kept as a well-treated captive. For a time, this polished veneer of an impregnable, self-reliant kingdom seemed to hold. Madagascar remained independent while other nations fell to colonial powers. However, like the limestone casing of the pyramids, this protective layer was ultimately lost, and its creation came at a devastating cost. The isolation crippled the economy. The technological advancements were limited and unsustainable, and the constant internal purges bled the nation of its people. The final polish created a brittle facade. While it projected an image of strength and cultural purity, it masked deep internal decay. The Queen's relentless pursuit of a perfect, isolated state left Madagascar weakened and vulnerable, a condition that would have profound consequences after her death, ultimately failing to prevent the very colonial conquest she had fought so ferociously to avoid. The sun beat down on the Giza plateau, glinting off the pyramid's pristine white casing stones, as the funeral procession made its slow, solemn journey. This was the culmination of decades of labor, the final act in a performance designed for eternity. At the heart of the procession was the mortal vessel of the god-king, Khufu, encased in a series of nested coffins and borne on a sled pulled by attendants. Priests chanted incantations, their voices a low drone against the desert wind, wafting incense smoke that carried prayers to the heavens. The air was thick with the scent of myrrh, natron, and the collective grief and awe of a nation. At the base of the colossal structure, the high priest, wearing the ceremonial leopard skin, performed the opening of the mouth ceremony on the king's mummy. This vital ritual, using sacred instruments, was believed to magically reanimate the pharaoh's senses, allowing his spirit, or Ka, to see, speak, eat, and drink in the afterlife. Once the rites were complete, the sarcophagus was moved with painstaking precision deep into the pyramid's core, navigating the narrow ascending passage to its final resting place in the king's chamber. Here, surrounded by granite walls polished to a mirror sheen, Khufu was laid to rest. The chamber was not filled with the glittering treasures one might imagine. Those were likely in other hidden chambers, or had been placed and sealed long ago. The focus here was on security. Now the final irreversible stage began. A team of workers, deep within the suffocating confines of the Grand Gallery, released the immense granite plugs that had been held in waiting. With a deafening, grinding roar that echoed through the stone labyrinth, these massive blocks slid down the ascending passage, sealing it permanently. For the workers who released them, there was no way back. Their only escape was a crude, vertical shaft, a well shaft leading down to the descending passage and out of the pyramid. As the last man scrambled out and the original entrance was sealed with a perfectly fitted casing stone, the Great Pyramid fell silent. It was now a fortress for the dead, a sealed vessel designed to protect its divine occupant from the ravages of time and the greed of mortals, a monument of absolute power, intended to last forever. For centuries beyond counting, the Great Pyramid of Khufu stood inviolate, a silent testament to a forgotten age. In its infancy, it was a dazzling spectacle. Clad in over 144,000 polished Tura limestone casing stones, it shone with a brilliant, almost supernatural light under the Egyptian sun, a smooth white mountain visible for miles. At its apex, a capstone, perhaps gilded in electrum, would have caught the first and last rays of dawn and dusk, a beacon connecting the earth to the heavens. As dynasties rose and fell, as the new kingdom pharaohs built their own hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the purpose of the Giza monuments became shrouded in legend. They were no longer seen as tombs, but as granaries built by the prophet Joseph, or repositories of ancient, magical knowledge from a time before a great flood. The world changed around them. The Persian Empire swept across the land, followed by the armies of Alexander the Great, who gazed upon the structures with astonishment. The Romans came, governing Egypt as a province, and their tourists scratched graffiti on the ancient stones, marveling at a monument that was already thousands of years old. Through all this, the pyramid kept its secrets. However, time is an unrelenting force. The perfection of its gleaming white shell was shattered in 1303 AD by a massive earthquake that loosened many of the casing stones. In the following years, these prized pre-cut blocks were systematically stripped away by sultans to build mosques and fortresses in the burgeoning city of Cairo. The pyramid was flayed, its brilliant skin removed to reveal the rougher, stepped core structure we see today. It transformed from a divine geometric object into a rugged man-made mountain. The entrance, once hidden, was now lost entirely, its location a mystery. The tomb's silence deepened. No longer the proud silence of invincibility, but the weathered silence of antiquity. A colossal relic waiting for the day its hardened heart would finally be breached. The pyramid's long silence was violently broken in the 9th century, around 820 AD. The Abbasid Caliph, Abdullah al-Mamun, son of the legendary Harun al-Rashid of 1001 Nights fame, arrived at Giza. Driven by tales of immense treasure and books of arcane knowledge hidden within, he was determined to be the first to enter. Unable to locate the true concealed entrance, the Caliph commanded his men to do the unthinkable, force their way through the solid stone. The work was brutal and punishing. His engineers and laborers attacked the north face, a little below the original entrance, using the most advanced demolition techniques of their day. They heated the massive limestone blocks with great fires and then doused them with cold vinegar, causing the thermal shock to crack the stone. Then, with brute force, battering rams, and iron wedges, they hammered their way into the pyramid's core, inch by painstaking inch. For weeks, the sound of hammering echoed across the plateau. Deep inside the darkness, surrounded by choking dust, they burrowed a rough tunnel. By sheer chance, or perhaps by hearing a sound, their tunnel eventually intersected with the descending passage. From here, they began to explore the original internal architecture. They found the ascending passage, but their way was barred by the massive granite plugs set in place thousands of years earlier. Undeterred, Al-Mamun's men simply tunneled around them, carving a crude bypass through the softer limestone that tourists still use to this day. The anticipation must have been unbearable as they finally broke through into the Grand Gallery. They ascended its magnificent corbelled height and entered the king's chamber. After centuries of inviolate slumber and weeks of relentless effort, they stood in the pharaoh's final resting place, and they found nothing. The chamber was stark, austere, and empty, save for a massive, lidless granite sarcophagus. There was no treasure, no mummified king, no ancient scrolls. Al-Mamun's great breach was a triumph of engineering and will, but it yielded only a deeper mystery. The empty sarcophagus discovered by Al-Mamun set the stage for a new era of exploration. one that slowly transitioned from treasure hunting to scientific inquiry. The 19th and 20th centuries saw figures like Flinders Petrie, the father of modern Egyptology, who conducted the first truly scientific survey of the pyramid, taking measurements of breathtaking accuracy that revealed the builders' profound knowledge of engineering and astronomy. But it is in our time, the 21st century, that the confrontation between ancient mystery and modern technology has truly intensified. We no longer use battering rams, but tools of light, radiation, and robotics. Tiny wheeled robots, like the Upuaut and Jetty projects, have been sent crawling up the mysterious, narrow shafts leading from the king's and queen's chambers. These robotic explorers have drilled through several stone doors, only to find further empty spaces and more sealed blocks, deepening the riddle of their purpose. Were they for ventilation? Or were they symbolic pathways for the king's soul to ascend to the stars? The answers remain elusive. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project employed a technique straight from particle physics, muon radiography. By tracking the path of cosmic ray particles as they passed through the pyramid, scientists could detect variations in density, effectively X-raying the entire structure. This groundbreaking, non-invasive method revealed a stunning discovery: a massive, previously unknown void, at least 30 meters long, located directly above the Grand Gallery. Dubbed the Big Void, its existence is confirmed, but its purpose is a complete enigma. Is it a hidden chamber, a structural feature designed to relieve stress, or something else entirely? Every new piece of data, every technological advance, seems to peel back one layer of the mystery only to reveal another, more complex one beneath. The Great Pyramid is no longer just a tomb. It is a timeless puzzle box. It has withstood millennia, and now it stands in silent defiance of our most advanced science, guarding its secrets as effectively today as it did on the day it was sealed.